In the next edition of It's About Money, my guest will be Abby Green. She's a freelance illustrator and designer, and we're looking forward to hearing about her journey in this path. Join us in another edition of It's About Money. Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nannette Nocon and thank you for joining us. My guest today is Abby Green. Abby, thank you so much. You're an illustrator and freelance designer, so thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I really respect you and your work and your impact on the community, so I'm very humbled to be here today.
Oh, you're very kind. So tell us about your journey as an artist. How did it all begin?
Yes, so I would say it all began when I was adopted from China and raised by a single mother in central Kentucky. And so I went to a local high school and they didn't have a strong art program or a strong academic program. And so I told my mom about this and she helped me find an art cohort at another high school. And so what that meant is just doing an interview, and it was made for students who wanted to really study visual arts, performing arts, or musical arts. And so for my last 2 years of high school, I was at that school. And nearing the end of my graduation, or nearing graduation, I really had to decide what kind of college I wanted to go to and what I wanted to do. And so my mom and I went to see Disney Pets. And being the young teenager that I was like, wow, animation sounds really cool. And so I was like, yeah, I want to pursue animation full time. And so my mom helped me look into state schools, and we decided on the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky. And so throughout the first 2 years of the university, I'm having a great time with studying and doing like all the projects that they assign me. But I realized like junior year, I haven't touched animation. And so I come to the realization that it's not something I can comfortably or financially pursue full time. And so around the same time, COVID hits and I'm left like alone in my apartment by myself, self-isolating, and I have all this time on my hands. And so I hear about this new app called Procreate, and it's for the iPad. It's a pixel-based art program, kind of like Photoshop, and I downloaded it. And so I start playing with the application, the brushes and the software, and I realized that illustration is something I really love. And along with that, I really get into understanding food and the industry and its impact on society and people, etc. And so those two things combined really helped shape my last year of college, because a lot of my work and printmaking and painting and graphic design were focused on those two themes. And so when I get out of school, I have a job at Starbucks to sustain myself. And it's not a job I love, but it's a job that helps me until I find a creative role. And so that August of like a couple months after graduation, I ran into a friend at a bar. His name's Armando, and he has a local design agency called Working with Saint. And he asked me out for coffee to say like, hey, I have a client that may be interested in working with you. You may be a right fit. And so from there, it kind of starts as an illustration gig, and then it kind of goes into like design stuff, like branding and sometimes animation and other illustration assets. So I think that's my first gig where freelance really kicked off. And so I was doing freelance for a couple years, and I'm picking up different contracts. And then, last spring, I had a major life event because my mom passed away. And so that left me without any immediate family, but the person I was dating, or the person I'm dating, was applying to business school. And so he invited me to come with him once he got accepted to Simon. And I really saw that as an opportunity, even though I would have to leave my community in Lexington. And so I moved up to Rochester with him, and I also decided to take a career break. And so from July of last year until January, I'm really just focusing on grieving. And so right now I'm kind of, like when January hits, I kind of started to feel the motivation to seek work again, continue freelance, seek opportunities. And now I'm currently deciding what kind of career path I want to take for the next 5 years.
Got it. Great. Wow, what a journey you've had.
Thank you.
It sounds like you really knew what you wanted, to be able to articulate that to your mom, that you're not learning what you want to learn, and then making a decision to pause a little bit and see not seeing the animation and downloading the app.
Yeah.
Hey, that's an amazing journey.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry about your loss.
Thank you.
So about the art in food, what made you decide that art is your thing? I mean, did you see visions of?
No, I would say like my first memory of art is actually, I'm not like religious, but I grew up Christian, and so I watched like a Mary and Joseph movie. I forgot what it was called, but there's like a still of Jesus or still of Joseph, and I decided to draw him, and my mom saw it, and she kind of like was like, "Wow, Abby, this is so cool." Like she was very supportive early on in my artistic career as a kid, and so like as soon as I got into high school, I didn't really feel passionate about like math or science or literature or English, so I really gravitated to my art program or my art classes at my local high school. And so like being able to transfer it into a new art or a new high school with an art program really helped engage that side of my brain, engage inside of my passion. And so when I went to college, I was able to branch out into digital media because that's the major I went into, even though I wanted to do animation. And so I would say that's like really when it sparked that kind of passion to continue art professionally.
I see. Very nice. Thank you for sharing that journey. So your preferred media would be digital?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Did you also, you were drawing baby Jesus.
Yeah.
But did you also paint? What other art did you do?
So besides digital illustration, in high school I started off doing like traditional media, so like charcoal, graphite, and acrylic paints. And so that was just to get a handle on the media. I think a lot of it was transferable when I went to university because the courses they put me in were required. They were called fundamental or foundation courses. And so it really just kind of exposed me to different digital media and different traditional media like oil painting, photography, printmaking. And so like I would say printmaking is another thing I really value as an artist, and it really kind of bleeds into the illustration work and into the graphic design that I do.
Nice, very nice. You know a lot about what you do. So what drew you to, did you decide then that digital is the way to go after doing all the hand traditional ways? Like, did you view that as the futuristic or just kind of intrigued you?
Yeah, I think it was a very like transformative time during COVID. And so once I downloaded Procreate and started learning illustration, I started trying out Adobe Illustrator, which is like I think an SVG-based program, which uses pinpoints instead of pixels, which is what Procreate uses. And so I think like the versatility of illustration and that you can do traditional, you can do digital is like really what drew me to that. And it's also, you can blend it with design, you can blend it with like marketing, like there's a lot of things you can do with it.
So for our viewers and for me, describe the difference between pixel and pinpoint.
Yeah, so I would probably just give the example of Procreate, which is a pixel-based program. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, it's basically using pixels to create an image. And then with SVG, it's based off of pinpoints. So it's more of like a computer or math-generated formula that the computer uses to see where the pinpoints are in the canvas. And usually you use like Figma or Adobe Illustrator for that kind of work.
Okay, got it. So one has to look that up, but that's really interesting to me. It's a difference. So you do, what got you into freelancing? Was it the person who you met at?
Yes, actually. I think during college, like my junior and senior year, I was like, everyone in those 2 years is like panicking, like what am I gonna do with my life? Everyone asks you like, what do you wanna be when you get out of college? And I'm like, I have no idea. And so I think running into my classmate Armando and him giving me a chance to be a designer in like kind of a leadership position was something I wouldn't have gotten if I tried to do full-time design roles. And so I'm very like appreciative of that part of my life. And so that being exposed to working with Saint, and Armando owns that, really kind of gave me a good entry into the graphic design world. And so it connected me with folks from the Lexington community. It connected me with like people in my like remote network. And so I started landing a ton of different contracts because of that.
Nice.
And I would say like later that year, like in the fall, a family friend reached out and said that she has a friend from Quartz Network, which is a B2B networking company, that needs help with their creative team. So their creative team was undergoing like a rebrand for their company, and they needed design support. And so that was another secondary freelance position I had that really sustained me along with working with Saint.
I see. Very nice. That's great. Opportunities opened up for you.
Yes,
That's
yes.
great. That's wonderful. How old were you when you moved to the United States?
I was probably like 18. I was definitely baby, so
Okay,
I don't
gotcha.
remember anything.
Yeah, just was curious. I just
Yeah.
wondered, so you're really the culture of wanting to advance and stuff. Just wondered how that kind of. But sounds like your mom was very supportive.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's great. So, can you explain to our listeners what it means to be a freelance illustrator and designer?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different when you're creative because there are a lot less conventions you have to follow. But I would say the main aspects of being a freelance illustrator or freelancer is realizing you're owning a business and dealing with finances, which were pretty stressful in the beginning of it, and then also a lot of the unexpected time and energy you put into like nurturing your career. I think people have to realize when they're becoming a freelancer, if they want to step into that you're basically running a business. And so what I mean by that is that there's a lot of expenses you have to realize, like handling or budgeting, setting your own hourly rate based on like what your worth is and how much experience you have in the industry. And then another is kind of realizing that you have to be very organized with your finances. And that means like understanding how to make invoices, contracts, like budgeting or using invoicing software, and then making sure you have all that prepared for tax season. And then I would say tax season is another big stressor of being a freelancer because they don't teach you how to be a business person, they don't teach you how to do taxes in art school, and so a lot of that I learned through like my mother or through a family friend or through my like cohort or my network. And so along with that, I would say also understanding that there's a lot of unexpected expenses, unexpected time you put into crafting your like brand awareness. And so things like networking, attending events, and like really polishing your portfolio or your book depending on what you're doing. And so I think those three things kind of really are things that I didn't realize until like the second or third year in of freelancing. The first year was very much getting very comfortable with freelancing, establishing my schedule, and really understanding what it is to be a professional artist or professional creative.
That's great. You discover that very early on because many people who go into self-employment, which is freelancing, they don't get that, right? They just think about the income when they make a lot of money. They tend to spend it all, and then the money is not consistent, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
exactly.
the challenge of freelancer. There are gigs that you do, projects that you do, and sometimes they're big, sometimes they're little, right? And if you don't know how to invoice, you might do all this work and don't get paid, right?
Yeah, maybe make mistakes. So.
Right. Or just really knowing, because if sometimes people get a big influx of money, they buy an expensive equipment, or so then they use up the money there, but they forgot to manage for the expenses coming up.
Yes.
So absolutely right, and those are nice discoveries that you became aware of early in your career. That's beautiful, and thank you for sharing that, because I think many people tend to discount the challenge that comes with it.
I would say there's a lot of security with pursuing full-time roles. Like a disadvantage of freelancing is you don't get any benefits. You don't get healthcare, you don't get dental vision, you don't get a 401k. So I think the finances are extremely important for making sure you're set up for success in a sense, or like you're set up to cover yourself during drier seasons when you're not generating income, because those are bound to happen. And then just making sure like you're just really prepared and understand that you need to be financially secure to pursue it.
Yeah, and then you described also the way that you would want to market and network. So many people focus on their art and they just think that this is my art and it will come. But you have to tell people about your art, you have to network, and you have to build your brand so people remember you.
Exactly.
So very good. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll hop into some of the projects, see some of the work that you've done.
Okay.
Thank you, Abby. And we'll be right back. I'm Nannette Nocon. It's About Money, and my guest is Abby Green.
An official message from Medicare. Wish you knew more about Medicare before turning 65? From understanding the different parts to learning how it works and finding out when and how to sign up. Visit Medicare.gov. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
And we're back. I'm Nannette Nocon. Thank you for joining us. My guest is Abby Green, and she's an illustrator and designer, digital. So we're going to go and check out some of your work that you've done in the past, right? They look beautiful. You're very talented. And so we're going to show on the screen some of the artwork that you have done in the past. And the focus has been on the food. Do you like food then? Is that why?
Yes, I think food really connects me to my mom, especially with her passing. I think understanding food and like really diving into the research behind it and its impact is something, or it's a way for me to honor her. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so driven towards that kind of industry, like the food and beverage space and the CPG space. And so like for this project, for example, was a rebrand concept for Lexington Farmers Market, which since I'm from Lexington, Kentucky, I have a lot of good source material to work with. And so for this project, I really wanted to explore a farmers market and if it created like new initiatives to support the local economy and raise awareness for security, like food accessibility and sustainability practice. And so you can just see like I really focused on like the illustration system, incorporating my style into this project and really testing out like fonts and typography to really get a strong message across about how illustration can really impact the design.
Nice, very nice, good work. It's very colorful and inviting. So,
Thank you.
And then you also did other project. This one?
Yeah, this one was a very transformative piece. So I actually made this one during COVID, I think. And so, as I said earlier, COVID was a time where I had so much like isolation that I had developed, mental and physical health issues because of it. A lot of people experience the same, but for me, it was going towards food as a way to understand what's happening to myself and what's happening or how the COVID and the pandemic affects people. And so I started looking into like the food industry and researching its impact on the economy, on people, on culture. And so along with that, I was getting acclimated to Procreate and to illustration, so I just turned to like looking at product or food photography, and I would use that as like still life studies, and I would practice using illustration with that.
Nice, very good. And then the last one that we have available here.
So this one is more recent. I did this one probably last summer, and this was with Good Foods Co-op in Lexington, Kentucky, and so they had commissioned me to create coloring pages. And so this was originally delivered as like a PDF, black and white, and I decided to like, since it's free to the public, anyone can have it, I decided just to do my own spin on it. And so this is really encompassing a lot of my illustration work and it sets the tone for my portfolio. I really love including satire and humor into my work, and it's really playful as well.
I see it. I see that the spoon is resting on the strawberry there.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for sharing part of your portfolio. And your website is
abbygreen.art.
abbygreen.art.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yes. So what sort of projects do you hope to work on in the future?
Yeah, so I think especially with the passing of my mom, I had to do a lot of reevaluation of my career, of my identity, of my purpose. And so I actually started volunteering in Rochester when I moved up. And some places I volunteered with like Food Link, where I like learned about how the food impacts the community and what I can do to like help redistribute it. I also volunteered at ROCO, Rochester Contemporary Arts Center, and I met some like great folks there that I still maintain a relationship with today. And I think just combining all of those volunteer experiences really impacted what kind of values I want as a designer or a creative. And so I've kind of I'm kind of wanting to transition out of freelance into full-time roles within the food beverage space and the CPG space, because I love the values around sustainability, affordability, and accessibility.
I see. Great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. You know what you want.
Yeah.
And that's really wonderful. So you've only been out of college for a couple of years and you're so determined. That's really impressive. So What would you say that some of the benefits of being freelancer?
Mm-hmm.
I know that you want to do something more full time, but what do you think the things that you like about freelancing?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I did as a freelancer was transferable into a full-time role because I was put in a position of leadership very early on. I had to learn how to adapt really quickly. Had to learn a lot of new softwares and tools and techniques that like you would have learned traditionally in a full-time design role. But for me, it was like very self-initiated. Mm-hmm. And then I think the big pro and con of being a freelancer is all the flexibility you get. There's a lot of variety in the work. You can choose your projects, your clients, and like the industries you want to target. But I would say like it could be a pro and con in the sense that you can make mistakes if you aren't prepared going in or knowing going in what you're setting yourself up for.
Got it. So freelancer really means that you're doing the whole cycle.
Yeah,
Whereas
it's very cyclical.
Yes, and also just from the beginning of the introduction to completing the contract, the project, doing the work, getting paid for it, and hoping for a repeat business,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's a lot of things that may not be in the creative space because you have to do them, administrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's great to learn it and be your self-starter, and I think that's a skill that's definitely transferable. So in terms of being self-employed as a freelancer, what would you say is the biggest negative? I mean, if there are any, outside of the things that we already talked about.
I would say like while I love freelance and I would still love to pursue it, it's just very financially difficult. I think that's one of the biggest barriers when you go into it is like you have to really have a buffer for the dry seasons. You have to have savings. You have to, set aside 30% of your income to pay for taxes. Sometimes you have to pay quarterly taxes, and it's also running a business. And all of those things combined, they don't teach you that. I would also say that like while freelance has given me a lot of opportunity, I would say like employers for full-time roles really evaluate someone based on their work experience in the resume. And so like, not for a creative at least, but I know for some industries, it's like the company that's attached to your resume really determines whether or not they give you a chance. And then in freelance, it's like your portfolio and your book and the way you speak to someone is what lands you that gig.
Sure. Well, that's great. It's nice that you're very thoughtful about this. Have you always been this way since you were young?
I think I had a lot of growing up to do in the past year. So I think really taking some time to like be with myself and understand myself is kind of what got me here. Yeah,
it's great. You've not even been in Rochester for a year, and yet you've dug into FoodLink and Rochester Contemporary, and that's really wonderful. And it sounds like you really find your own place in the community. But we've got a wonderful public market here, and all those opportunities in front of you. So if you're giving someone advice, so first as a freelancer and as an artist, what advice would you provide?
Yeah, I would say like being a freelancer is definitely a long-term game. And I see this all in the perspective of someone who did it right out of college. And so in college, I was someone who really loved doing my work. I would stay at the studio until like 2 a.m. And I put a lot of effort into polishing or getting a lot of variety in my portfolio. And so I think, going back to my other point, like I was really evaluated by my portfolio and by my word-of-mouth referrals. And so I think just being prepared to understand that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And then in terms of illustrating, is it something that someone can learn, or it's just kind of be a part of you? I mean, I guess you could learn the software, but you have to have some artistic side to you.
I would say like illustration's more of a creative or like technical thing, but I would say design is definitely accessible to everyone. They have Canva, which is like for non-designers, and marketing blends design in it for those kind of departments. So I think it's anything you put practice into, you can make it work. My partner was in a monastery for 10 years, and he decided he wanted to go into finance, and he's done really well so far. So I think like if that is like a success story, like anyone can do it,
Yeah, right. It's just really a matter of being focused.
Exactly.
And in school anyway, the purpose of education is to learn how to learn, right? So it doesn't stop when you graduate. You just actually many of the artists that I know who've are very advanced in years, they tell me that the secret is having a full-time job, whether it's a professor or some other job, and then they do their art on the side whenever they have time off. And I said, oh, that's really sage advice, especially those who teach.
Yeah.
Because then they have this dedicated time where they can take off and spend time in the artistic side, but it's not their primary source of income, right? So if there's money that's made, that's sort of nice because it supports the art, but then they have a different way of making a living that kind of sustains it. So, I mean, these are people that I've known that have been, someone I was also a guest at my show, Kurt Feuerherm. He taught at RIT for many years, and he said that's the best advice he could give. He passed away in his 90s, but what an amazing story of being able to teach and devote to his art and be successful in his art, but also have a nice teaching career.
I think it's definitely a spectrum. Like, it depends if you want to pursue freelance for like the versatility, the flexibility, or you want to do corporate or in-house design or a full-time role for the stability. And I think the happy middle is like what your friend went through. And so I know people that have also done the same route. They have like a full-time design job and they're doing like public markets and they're selling their own work on the side. But for me, it's like I was kind of put into that space, the freelance space, and I didn't know anything else. Sure. And so I thought, like, I'm doing really well, like my career is really good trajectory, and so for me it's kind of experiencing that in its glory and then realizing I want stability in a full-time role.
Sure, that's great. And what's great about life, what's great about this country is there's so much opportunity, right? You try it out and you do something else, I've been self-employed for 40 years. So it's understand the ups and downs of that, but it's rewarding, but it also has a lot of challenges that you just described. You know, there's financial stuff, and luckily I'm in the financial planning business, so I can use my skills. But it's a challenge. But you've been very helpful because I think if you have viewers that are looking into a career of freelancing, art, illustration, design. So you've been very insightful, and I really appreciate the time that you've spent with me today. So
thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome, and all the best in your endeavors. I think you'll do very well. You're very reflective and really review where you are, and that's a lot of times people don't have that skill. And I think if you're doing something, you kind of reflect on it, think about it, what's the next step, and then you just pivot and do something else if it's not what you had expected, and right? So no one has to feel stuck. So I really appreciate that, and I'm grateful that you're able to be my guest today to share those experiences.
Thank you so much, Nannette.
So all the best to you, Abby. And thank you, our guests, for joining us today. I'm Nannette Nocon. It's About Money. It's our 199th edition. So thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Nannette Nocon.